From the heartland of America, focused on God, family, and country, the mouthpiece of the Midwest. This is Dale Carter's America.
And welcome back to the podcast with a lot to talk about in the wake of Donald Trump being convicted on all counts. Of course he was. We'll get to that in just a second with lots of perspective on this. Everybody in the media is talking about this, so we're going to try and find some angles that maybe they haven't talked about, give you some things to think about. That's what we do here on Dale Carter's America. We are brought to you in part by my good friend Bob Watson, Blue Springs State Farm agent for 50 years. Get a rate comparison, save some money. Bundle your home and car insurance and save even more. Bob Watson is at 7th and Main in Blue Springs, licensed to both Missouri and Kansas, so that means he can take care of you anywhere in Missouri or Kansas. 816-229-7878. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And if you're outside Missouri and Kansas, find the most reputable State Farm agent you can find, because State Farm is definitely a great brand. We invite you to share the news that we give you on the podcast. Share the views. Get it out there. Let's get people talking about stuff. I mean, you know, there are people who think a certain way about what we talk about on the podcast who I'm almost certain have never listened or watched one single episode of this podcast. They think they have preconceived notions about what we are. Let's get the real word out there, and Kurt's going to tell you how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure that you are subscribed to the video podcast, ideally on YouTube or Rumble. Make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment. If you're watching this right now, leaving a comment really helps the algorithm. And then you can get the audio podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. And then make sure to follow us on Facebook as well. We're also on Instagram, but Facebook is where most of the action happens, where we get a lot of engagement, you know, everyone chiming in the comments and all that. So we enjoy it. Thank you very much.
And we have a lot of fun with that. I put up a cartoon that I saw somebody put out that had like an old Joe Biden and an old Donald Trump. Let's face it, he's old and a bigger guy, and they're like in track clothes, you know, Biden in blue, Trump in red, and they're going to do a race. On your mark, get set, and right before go, the judge in a robe right next to Donald Trump shoots him in the ankle. Go.
Nice. Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are right now. Okay, before we get into all of that, we want to note this. The Missouri Broadcasters Association had their big meeting over the weekend, their banquet and awards ceremony and all that. I was not there, even though I was nominated for Best Morning Show in Missouri, because I had dog duty. My wife is traveling on business down in Florida, so I could not be there when my morning show was named Large Market Morning Show of the Year. And I was not the only winner associated with this podcast. Kurt, you picked up some hardware.
I did. Just found out on Saturday I won a commercial announcement series award, so very thankful for that. And yeah, it's a great honor, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it. I was on baby duty that day. So.
We had babysitting. You had a real live baby, and I got two fur babies at home that I was responsible for, so we couldn't go. We always enter I don't even know why we do this anymore, but we enter the podcast, and it never even gets nominated.
Yeah.
And I have a theory about that relative to the judges.
Oh, really? What could that be?
A little conspiracy theory going on.
It's not a conspiracy
Maybe
theory.
It's not. They just don't like us.
Yeah.
So there you go.
They don't. It has nothing to do with politics. They just don't like the cut of our jib. You know what I mean?
That could be. Although maybe they didn't know it was us they were giving the other awards to. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, you know, we do these events once in a while at Funhouse Pizza. We've got one that's kind of coming together. I can't give you all the details. This is more of a save the date kind of thing for June 25th at 6 p.m. Okay, so if you're free June 25th at 6 p.m. and like to hang out with us at Funhouse Pizza in Lee Summit on 50 Highway, that is where we're planning to be, and I think it's going to be something really special. So hopefully that you will be there and be able to participate in the podcast event, the live event, June 25th at Funhouse Pizza in Lee's Summit. They're also in Blue Springs on 7 Highway. Jim Dingman, a great guy, has fantastic pizza. That's first and foremost. A fun atmosphere is second, and he's an American. He believes like we do. He's a Marine. He wants you to pull your pants up when you come inside. He wants to hire people. If you got kids looking for a summer job, Funhouse Pizza, a great place to work. He pays people well. He expects them to show up and do their job, though. So if you got some slacker playing video games this summer, give him a little boot in the butt there and say, hey, go make some money this summer.
Tremendous people.
Jim Dingman and Funhouse Pizza. And again, circle the date on your calendar, June 25th at 6 p.m. We're hoping to put something very special together, and I'll tell you more about that in the coming weeks.
We'll put a flyer together and stuff, too, that we'll put out on Facebook and all that.
So, Royal Roofing and Solar bring you this podcast as well. We've had a lot of stormy weather in Kansas City, a lot of hail-damaged roofs out there. Make sure you've got a reputable firm giving you the estimate on the roof. And the one that I trust that did the roof on my house is Royal Roofing and Solar. Austin Watterson, fantastic company there in Cass County, but they work metro-wide. In fact, I was having lunch at Jack Stack in Overland Park, and I saw a truck from Royal Roofing and Solar. Nice. So they definitely get around the metro. So if you want to ask about solar too, turn your house into its own energy generation unit, they can help you there too. 816-540-7057, solarbyroyal.com, royalcontractingkc.com. They do the roof over my house. Let them do the roof over your house. Trustworthy guys who will get the job done. All right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Medicare Simplified KC is also a sponsor of this podcast. 10,000 people a day turn 65 in this country, and they don't know anything about Medicare. Somebody reached out to me. One of my friends on Facebook says, I'm turning 65. What do I do? And what did I tell her? I told her what I tell you. Get a hold of Kirk Doris at Medicare Simplified KC and let him talk to you about the different things that are out there. It's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. You've got choices and options. Make sure Kirk and Lori Hocker, who's his partner, help you navigate that Medicare maze. All right? 816-701-6661. Get the answers and know your options. They're at 3600 South Nolan Road in Independence. They'll come to you if you can't come to them. And, of course, you can read all about them on the web at MedicareSimplifiedKC.com. Get ahead of this. 65 is just around the corner for a lot of folks. 10,000 a day.
Yep.
It's a big number.
And you can request a free policy review on their website also.
All right.
There you go.
So here we go. Trump guilty on all counts. I knew it would go one of a couple of ways. It might be a hung jury. It might be a quick conviction. Certainly it was going to go one way or the other. And as the convictions came out, it was like a shotgun, man. It was like all of them. He was going to be guilty. And when you look at, and we could talk about this from all different angles, but the judge who sends them back in a case that has so many holes in it, I think a first-year law student could shred this thing at the appeal level. Juan Merchan basically says, there are three underlying theories on this. You don't have to pick one. You could pick one of three. And maybe four of you think this is it, four of you think this is it, and four of you think that is it. And I'll take that as a unanimous verdict. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the right clip, but we're going to play it. This might be a slightly older clip.
Thank you very much. I would say, in listening to the charges from the judge, who's, as you know, very conflicted and corrupt, because of the confliction, very, very corrupt. Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job, and it's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace, and I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do.
Yeah, this is before the conviction.
So, he obviously didn't beat it. Merchan talking about his confliction, a donor of Joe Biden's. You can't make this up. In this country, a donor to Joe Biden somehow jumped the line to get this case. He also has a couple of other cases that are relative to Donald Trump. How does that happen? I mean, I've got so many questions that I want answered, yet Joe Biden goes out and basically, after the conviction is announced, he basically says, this is normal, and I don't want you to ask any questions.
Okay, here is the clip of Biden at the press conference.
The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen. It was a process that Donald Trump's attorney was part of. The jury heard 5 weeks of evidence, 5 weeks. And after careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system.
Yeah. So it's dangerous for us to ask any questions. So we're going to push the danger button here on Dale Carter's America, and we're going to ask some questions. By the way, there is a new CBS News YouGov poll that was released on Sunday of this week, found 54% of those surveyed saying Trump got a fair shake, while 46% thought it was unfair. Now, this poll is of independent voters. I'm not quite sure how they got that, but 80% of Republicans who were polled say the trial was unfair and the verdict was wrong, and a minority, very slim minority of Democrats, majority of Democrats say that the trial was fair. So it falls on party lines. What will it matter? That's another question I have here. What will it matter? I don't think it will matter in the long run. What will matter, the border, inflation, energy, crime, foreign policy, that's probably what will matter. But we have this trial in front of us, and I have some questions. You probably have some thoughts on this as well. Let me go through mine first, and then you can jump in with yours. How do you tie a local misdemeanor that had expired under statute of limitations to federal election law? How do you do that?
And make it a felony, too.
Right. That's what they did.
Yeah.
This is the same administration that tells Texas you can't defend the Texas border because that's a federal responsibility, yet this DA was allowed to take expired misdemeanors that you wouldn't prosecute unless the guy's name was Donald Trump and he was running for president, and bootstrap them to federal election law after the Fed passed on it, said there was nothing there. All right? How do you do that? Why does the number 3 at Justice leave his post to go up to New York to help Alvin Bragg construct this case? Remember, Bragg had passed on this case once before. Why does the number 3 at Justice go up there and help him out? Well, that's a question that Jim Jordan has, and he runs an oversight committee at the House of Representatives, and he says he's going to pull them both in and ask that question. Are those dangerous questions?
No, they're perfectly legitimate questions. And there was actually a recap that I'll just read here real quick, because this is getting to a lot of what you're talking about. But this was from Greg Price on Twitter, so hat tip to him. But he says, just a quick recap of the Juan Merchan Alvin Bragg show trial in NYC. The Soros-funded DA elevated a misdemeanor to a felony despite lowering 60% of all felonies for actual criminals in his jurisdiction. The lead prosecutor resigned his position as the third highest ranking member of Biden's DOJ to join Alvin Bragg's team going after Trump. You just mentioned that. The judge donated to Joe Biden and his daughter, who raised millions of dollars for Democrats off the Trump prosecutions. The other lead prosecutor has also donated to Joe Biden. The lead witness that the whole case relies on is a convicted perjurer and serial liar who admitted during the trial to stealing money from the Trump organization.
Well, there's a crime.
That's Michael Cohen they're talking about. Mm-hmm. The judge put a gag order on Donald Trump for pointing out the political conflicts of interest of the people prosecuting him. This crime relies on the idea that Trump paid off Stormy Daniels to conceal another crime, which is not mentioned in the indictment. We've talked about that before, too. The judge barred Trump's defense team from explaining to jury that no campaign finance violation occurred, but allowed prosecutors to assert as fact in their closing that there was. The judge cleared out the courtroom when Michael Cohen's former attorney was exonerating Trump, but allowed the prosecution to bring in Stormy Daniels to talk about whether or not Trump used a condom. The judge barred a former FEC commissioner from testifying that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. And finally, the judge is allowing the jury to not have to reach a unanimous verdict on the underlying unnamed crime Trump committed. So that's an important one, too, because basically, like he mentioned, the felony crime of campaign violation related to campaign violation is relying on there being an underlying crime to the payment made to Stormy Daniels, but that underlying crime is not made clear in the indictment or in the case. So the judge sort of made an exception in allowing the jury to not agree on what that underlying crime was. They can basically just make it up and then come to the verdict based on that. There's also the fact that the Trump team tried to have the trial moved upstate because obviously, you say a jury of our peers. Right. I think we need to actually analyze what that phrase means, because a jury of your peers should be people who are from the same community as you, or people who are not necessarily like-minded, but you're my peer. You know what I mean? You people that I work with are my peers. I would trust you to objectively, be in a jury if I was accused of a crime. If I did the crime, you would convict me. If not, you wouldn't. And these people in the jury, they were all surveyed about where they got their news, their political leanings, things like this, and they're all, except for I think maybe one person, they were all very anti-Trump, clearly. So it's not a jury of his peers. He won 5% in that district in New York or something like that. So it's ridiculous.
Well, we're going to see what happens moving forward. It is going to be appealed, but none of that will happen until after the election. Sentencing is going to be on July 11th, right before the Republican convention. But this judge, again, let's go back to him for a second. How does he get the case? Don't you have a question on that, considering he's taken other cases that involve Donald Trump? Doesn't there feel like there's some monkey business going on there? What about the Constitution and the constitutional protections for the defendant? You hear about this a lot, especially in the wake of the George Floyd riots that happened in this country, about how, they're just misunderstood. We have to give them their protections in court. Trump didn't get any protections in court. There were violations of both the Fifth and Sixth Amendment to the Constitution that's in the Bill of Rights, obviously. So that's going to be looked at. And while Democrats say that Merchan was just fine to hear this, there's another issue going on with the Supreme Court. Justice Alito, apparently his wife, I don't even know the whole story on this. I think she flew some flags on their property that somehow tie into January 6th. And
she allegedly flew a flag upside down for a day, which right. And now they're trying to have him recuse himself for basically nothing. I mean, that's not an issue.
He's
at all.
One of 9 justices on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They let Juan Merchan be the only judge sitting in judgment of a former president. This thing has problems throughout. And is it a conspiracy when I look at the other side? I know you probably don't. My wife hates it when I do this, but sometimes when there's a big issue going on, I'll flip over to CNN. I'll even hold my breath and flip over to MSNBC just to get an idea of what the other side is saying, right? Well, the other side are Democrats like Alan Dershowitz, who votes for Democrats. He voted for Joe Biden. He says he's not going to vote for Donald Trump. And he says this was a travesty. Jonathan Turley, who's a constitutional scholar, also a Democrat, says this was a travesty. I'm not a lawyer. Kurt's not a lawyer. These gentlemen are lawyers, and they say there are problems throughout this. So with all due respect, Mr. President, we're Americans. We still have the First Amendment right in this country. We're going to ask these questions. And if you don't like it, you can stick it up your ass, if you can find your ass.
Yeah. Well, there's also obviously plenty of people on MSNBC that are just going crazy over this. But I wanted to say something, too. This is kind of my take on it, because I was thinking over the weekend about what to say. Obviously, it's a BS trial. I mean, that's goes without saying, I think, for people that watch this podcast. But what's the takeaway? How do we move forward from here? And to me, Republicans are a lot of talk and no action, it makes me think, and I think the best take I saw was people saying, well, thank God we didn't go after Hillary Clinton. You know, like that would have been election interference. That would have been anti-democratic if we went after Hillary Clinton for the crime she actually committed, like we said we were going to. We didn't, you know? And so the reason that we didn't in a lot of ways is because people were like, oh, well, if we go after her, then when they get power, they're going to come after their political opposition.
Well, let me put a pin in that for a second, because I want to remind you also that Donald Trump was impeached for making a phone call asking the Ukrainians to take a look at what Joe Biden did. Biden wasn't even a candidate at that point, and he was impeached because we don't do that in this country. We don't go after our political opponents in that way, and yet here we are.
Exactly. So we can take the high road as much as we want. We can post upside down flags on Twitter. You know, we play clips a lot, and it's good that they do this, but like the Senate hearings and stuff, we can yell at people in the Senate hearings. That doesn't do anything. None of that matters, because the people who have the power right now are using it to prosecute their political opponents. They're throwing the January 6 people in solitary confinement. They're trying to put Trump in jail. They rigged the election. Okay, so until we start actually taking things seriously, until we start throwing their people in jail, none of this is going to change. We can talk all we want. We can say we're going to take the high road. We're about policy. We're about doing what's right. That doesn't matter, because they're putting our people in jail and we're losing in a very serious way. So, you know, we need to start going, like, for example, Anthony Fauci. Everyone talks about imprisoning Anthony Fauci. There's a hashtags all over Twitter. You have people in Senate hearings, rah, 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 you know, we're going to do something about Fauci. Guess what? Nothing's happened. So until people like him start going away for a long time and they actually see that we're willing to use our power to prosecute their people, then they're just going to keep getting away with it. You know, it's like we are past the point of like polite society republic type stuff. I mean, this is like we need to start taking things more seriously, in my opinion.
Well, Hunter Biden's trial is officially underway. I wonder how the president will react to that. We'll see what he does. Let me give you some.
Well, that's a good example too, because nothing's going to happen to him. I mean, he'll get off.
It's the first time that a son of a sitting president has ever been prosecuted in this country. We're doing a lot of firsts right now, and I'm not sure all of them are great. Let me give you some positives, though, after Kurt just basically gave you the negative side of this. Let me give you the positives. While the Democrats will get to say convicted felon in all of their ads for Donald Trump, I think it's backfiring. Republicans didn't loot, didn't burn buildings down. You know what they did do? They gave a record amount of money to the Trump campaign. Mm-hmm. And Democrats did something that Trump could not do. Unite the party. Rhinos joining conservatives. People like Mitt Romney are coming to the table now and saying that this was just horrible, and they're on the Trump train now. They're uniting the party with rhinos joining, conservatives like us. Blacks and Hispanics are coming to the party as well. They see this for what it is. It's a sham to cover up a bad president. The Senate says it will shut down business for the remainder of Joe Biden's term, and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is on board as well. They're going to shut it down. He's not going to get anything done. There will be no cooperation moving forward. So that's a first step. All right? We don't need to go out and burn down Quick Trips and commit felonies. You know, this election is still going to come down to what's going on. You say it's boring policy stuff. I say it's, you know, what you're paying for groceries, you know?
It's not just boring policy stuff, though, but it's that Republicans are not putting their money where their mouth is. We just passed $90 billion or whatever it was, another $90 billion aid to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan. They're not closing the border. I mean, it's like, obviously we need to vote for Trump because he is the better candidate, but like we need to start using our power the way that they use their power. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, you're too young to remember this, but in 1991, David Duke was running for governor of Louisiana, and a guy named Edwin Edwards ran against him. Edwards was a convicted felon. He was convicted on a bribery conviction, as a matter of fact. And the slogan for Edwin Edwards was, "Vote for the felon, it's important." And David Dukes went down in flames in that because he was actually a Nazi or KKK member.
Yeah,
is what David Dukes was.
KKK member.
And Edwin Edwards won that election, and the slogan was "Vote for the felon, it's important." And I would say, in this case, in this election, vote for the felon, it's important, because what matters is the border, inflation, energy, crime, and foreign policy. Those are the things that matter.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump has been talking about those things, right? And Democrats are all about fear and division. If this guy takes over, he'll never leave. It's the end of democracy as we know it. There'll never be another election in this country. Trump hasn't said any of that stuff. And he has already been president once. And he left. And now he'd like to come back. And I think when voters look at how their lives are affected, this trial, as much as we're going to make out of it, is just noise. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, you're right. It is just noise, and it doesn't really affect Trump's election prospects that much. Like, I think, if anything, it might help his poll numbers and things like that. There was, I don't have to play the clip, but you can look it up. He was at the UFC on Saturday, and it was like just huge. I mean, everyone's on their feet cheering for him.
He's like a rock star.
He really is. Yeah.
Joe Biden, looks like happy hour at the VFW. There's about 4 people on bar stools whenever he comes in.
I'll play it. It's which is great, but it does matter because they're putting their opponents in jail. I mean, that's like very serious stuff, So yeah, he could still win the election. Yeah, it might not hurt his poll numbers, but they're trying their damnedest to really, and he has the infrastructure to defend himself. He has the name recognition, the popularity, the money. At the end of the day, he's probably going to be fine. I mean, unless they are able to get him in jail for the rest of his life, like, he's not going to be that worse off other than having to go through it. But they're coming after regular people too.
Yeah, I know. So I hate to say there's no way, because God knows we're in untested territory right here. But, even though he was convicted on all these counts, he's a first-time offender, right? So white-collar crime, and as much as Democrats would love to put him in jail, quite frankly, I can't take credit for this. I heard it over the weekend. I can't even tell you the show that I heard it on. This is almost like Star Wars. Like when the Emperor, is about to be killed, he says, if you kill me, you'll just make me stronger. You put him in jail, you'll just make him stronger.
Yeah.
He's not going to go away. And by the way, I don't like to use fear on this podcast, but here's something to think about. If Biden is reelected, here's one little snippet that he's already let out of the bag. He will allow the Trump tax cuts to expire. He calls them an inflation bomb. Whatever the hell that means. I mean, inflation went to 9% under Joe Biden, and now he says it's under control. It's still going up. It's just not going up at the same rate, but it's going up and up and up. Now, let me tell you what the Trump tax cuts did for this economy. When we pull up the debt clock, which we've looked at a lot on this show, it shows you the mounting debt, that we're adding $1 trillion to the debt every 100 days. When you also look at the debt clock, it shows you revenue to the Treasury. Revenue to the Treasury, based on the Trump tax cuts, is at a record high of $5 trillion and going up. That's what the Trump tax cuts did. Nancy Pelosi said, this is crumbs. You're not getting anything. You're not getting anything. Well, the industry that it fueled is throwing off taxes of $5 trillion. That's a big number, and it's not nearly big enough. So he says he's going to let those expire. Taxes are going to go up. Productivity will go down. This is not rocket science. And when productivity goes down, where's the government going to get that $5 trillion it needs to pay the interest on the debt? The interest is going up because guess what? Interest rates are higher. So now interest to the debt is going to be at an all-time high. And we're already at a $2 trillion deficit. And he's going to end the thing that's spurring money to the Treasury. We've talked about this historically. Every time that there's a massive tax cut, go back to John F. Kennedy in the 1960s, when that massive tax cut came in, when Reagan's tax cut came in, when Trump's tax cut came in. What happened to money going into the Treasury? Without fail, it went up exponentially. And yet he's going to end that. So that's what's going to happen if he gets reelected. It's the same old story. It's play number 2 in the 5-play playbook. Somebody has something you don't have, and that's not fair. Instead of worrying about paying the bills of the federal government, Joe Biden is more concerned about shifting the burden and creating programs that funnel money through Washington, D.C. Same old story. So if he gets reelected, good luck.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we say it every time. We say it every time that this is the most important election, but this is actually the most important election. So, and I've said before, I think the reason we say it every time is because every time it is the most important. The stakes are getting higher and higher. So, here we are.
Indeed, we are. And if you are at 45 or older, you know what should be first on your call list today? That's a call to my good friend, Dr. Mark Taramina at Midwest GI Health and Wellness. Because if you're 45, it means you need to get your colonoscopy, the colon cancer screening. It's important. You know, we used to say 50. And I remember when I turned 50, I'm going to put it off. I'll put it off and put it off. And I put it off till I think I was like 53, 54, something like that. And I went in and I got screened. And like many people see, there's nothing to see. Come back in 10 years. But there are people who get polyps. And those polyps can turn into colon cancer. So and it's happening earlier and earlier. And we have examples of celebrities, young celebrities who you would never think would get colon cancer. They have, and they've died. Let's do something about that. 45 is the new 50. So put that on your day planner for today. If you're 45 or older, or you know somebody who is, tell them to call Dr. Mark Taramina at Midwest GI Health and Wellness. You can find him on the phone at 816-836-2200. He's on the web at midwestgihealth.com. Great folks there who will take care of you. They can do it all. Upper GI, lower GI, whatever you need. You don't need a doctor's referral. Just get with the folks who take care of a lot of people right out of Lee's Summit, Missouri. They'll take care of you. Speaking of Lee's Summit, that's where my good friend Michael Schroer is from. He's a Kansas City resident with 35 years of residential and commercial construction experience. If you're looking for your new home, whether it's your first-time home, your forever home, or maybe you're downsizing because the kids have graduated, they're out of the nest now, you got too many bedrooms in that house, you want to move on. Maybe you got a piece of land to build your dream home, something in between. Let Michael Schroer take care of you. Real estate pro with RE/MAX Heritage. You can find him on the phone at 816-783-5800. And he'll take care of you. I was going to ask you if his website was back up again.
He's on RE/MAX, the RE/MAX site.
Okay, the RE/MAX site is where you can find him. What's that website for the audio only?
Michael-Schroer.rmxheritage.com.
And you spell Schroer, Schroer.
That's right.
All right. So good folks who help us bring you this podcast every week here at Dale Carter's America. I thought we could spend some time talking about the historical perspective of all of this, the history of the media and the presidency, because we've said it for a long time, and I think most people who listen or watch this podcast would agree that the media is in the bag for Democrats, by and large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly now they are.
Yeah. Well, even going back. And I would put the beginning of the modern presidency with FDR. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast. The presidency has gotten stronger and stronger since FDR took over and served his 4 terms as president of the United States. Congress has gotten weaker and weaker, and that's not the way the Constitution was drawn up, but that's the way it's happened. And let's start with the media. And the first thing they buried like a cat turd was the fact that our president was in a wheelchair. Public didn't need to know that, right? So the media made that decision for us. Now, I don't know that it would have changed anything. You know, a lot of people think FDR was a great president. Came into this country at the start of the Great Depression. We had World War II coming as well. But that's something to file away, because I think that's where it started, with the media tipping the scales toward Democrats. FDR in a wheelchair. John F. Kennedy in the 1960s. One of my personal heroes. I love listening to the speeches of John F. Kennedy. Can still get goosebumps listening to him stir the passions of this country. Can you imagine Joe Biden giving a speech that stirred the passions of this country?
Yeah.
Probably not. Well, JFK was basically using the White House as a red light district. He was. You know, have you taken the tour of the White House?
I have, but I was very young. I don't really remember it.
one of the many times I've been in the White House, I took the Secret Service tour, which you can only get if you know somebody who's involved in the Secret Service, and it involves the press room. The press room is built over the old swimming pool, the indoor swimming pool. And JFK used that as a lap pool. And I'm sure there were some wild parties going on when Jackie was out of town. In fact, there's one key that the Secret Service has that opens every lock in the White House. And right in front of the podium in the press room, there's a trap door. And the key fits that. And the Secret Service agent who took me on the tour, he said, open that trap door. And you open the trap door right in front of the podium where Karine Jean-Pierre gives her daily briefing, and you see the pool. And it still smells like chlorine. So it's kind of an interesting little thing there. So JFK, everybody in the press corps knew that he was poking anything with legs. Did you, as a public, know that he was doing that? Would it have changed anything?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, the perspective, because we know about a lot of these things now, but
they covered it up.
Yeah, I don't know what it was like back then. So
all right. So fast forward, Dwight Eisenhower's vice president, Richard Nixon, runs against John F. Kennedy and loses narrowly, right? And there were some things about that election that people wondered about, much like the 2020 election. People wondered about it. They wondered about the number of dead people who voted in Chicago. They wondered about West Virginia and some of the ballots that came in from there. It was a very thin margin. Richard Nixon did the classy thing, I think, in 1960, and he didn't challenge the election on any level. He went away. Well, his time would come in 1968. He won the election in 1968, and in 1972, he was so far ahead of George McGovern, he would win like every state except Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. That was a huge win for Richard Nixon. Some people on his behalf, they broke into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. That's kind of the confusing mess that gets you into Watergate. Nixon finds out about it, and he covers it up. He didn't commit the crime. He covered it up. What was the media reaction to that?
To Watergate?
Yeah.
I mean, pretty bad.
Yeah, Nixon's got to go. In fact, they had the votes for impeachment, and he would ultimately resign. I wonder, had this happened and a Democrat was president, I don't know, Lyndon Johnson, John F. Kennedy, FDR,
Joe
Biden, would they cover it up or would they expose it? That's a question I think worth answering there. I'm not saying that Nixon was a good guy and all that, and I think that when you commit a crime, you ought to answer for it in some way or another. But again, Nixon didn't commit the crime. He covered it up, and they always say the cover-up is worse than the actual crime. Fast forward to the 1990s.
Step into Wick's studio.
Sorry.
Fast forward to the 1990s. Bill Clinton, like John F. Kennedy, his hero and my hero, he had a line all the way out the door, right? The names are so numerous, it finally gets down to Monica Lewinsky. He was porking the help. He was porking, an intern in the White House. Think about that. President up here, intern way down here. The power difference and all that. And the media basically rolled with the narrative. It's just about sex. It's just about sex. Right? Nothing to see here. Play number 5. Then you get Trump. Oh my gosh. Donald Trump. Let's start with the Russia hoax. The media bought that hook, line, and sinker. Right?
Yep.
Everybody was on board. Our foreign intelligence officers all signed this big letter. They were on board that Russia was involved in this election. Turns out Hillary Clinton fabricated the entire thing with the Steele dossier. She got fined by the Federal Elections Commission for misuse of campaign funds for the Steele dossier. She committed a crime.
Thank God we didn't prosecute her, right?
Comey comes out and says, it's probably not 100% kosher, but we don't prosecute these kinds of things. Unless, of course, you're Donald Trump. So the Russia hoax is a hoax. There's nothing to it. There is nothing there. And now everything imaginable and unimaginable has been used in what we're now using as lawfare. And that may well end up being the word of the year. You know how they have a word of the year every year? I think lawfare is going to be the word of the year.
Yep.
And I was thinking about this in true historical context. When Hitler was running the Third Reich, Germany, Nazi Germany, right? There were a lot of enemies that Adolf Hitler needed to get rid of. And they had trials. And boy, they were show trials. The pomp and the circumstance of a trial. They even had a judge. And they had a prosecutor. But the defendants got no rights. And when they tried to defend themselves, the judge was like, we don't need to hear from you. Let's just move this along. Just move this along. That's the comparison and it's not the Nuremberg trials from after the war.
Oh, okay.
This is the trials that happened while Hitler was running the show.
Oh, gotcha.
And you can look that all up in history because it's there. And defendants got virtually no rights. The decision was in before the trial started. And if that reminds you of what just happened in a Manhattan courtroom, I think you're on the right track. Because the fix was in from the very beginning.
Yep, 100%.
And when Democrats like Alan Dershowitz and Jonathan Turley, esteemed lawyers, Alan Dershowitz, one of the most famous lawyers in this country, definitely not a Republican, he's not a conservative. And he sees this as the sham that it was. And your president basically says, nothing to see here. In fact, it's dangerous for you to even ask questions. Wow. I can't believe an American president went out in front of the microphones and actually said that. And then you got that picture of him on the way out of that briefing that he gave. And what was that sneer all about?
This is really weird. We'll watch it.
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir?
Here it comes. Look at
Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the
Shuffle
ballot,
off.
sir?
I gotta shuffle off. There's ice cream in here somewhere. I don't know where it is.
How creepy is that, man?
That was a creepy smile. I mean, that's almost a like, I just farted smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He like shit his pants and then forgot what the question was.
Was that a fart, sir? Most of it. Some of it.
Yeah, right.
Whatever the line is there.
It started as a fart.
Well, to be continued on all of this. We'll keep watching it for what it is. And meanwhile, we want to thank one of our other sponsors, again, Bob Watson, Blue Springs local State Farm agent for 50 years. He can insure you with auto, home, life, health insurance, pet insurance, boat insurance. He can insure your business as well. Licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. Get a quote from Bob Watson, State Farm agent, at 816-229-7878. His offices are at 7th and Main in Blue Springs. They have a tremendous staff. I've been with them for nearly 30 years. I've been a State Farm guy my entire life. And when I moved to Blue Springs, Missouri, first thing I did was I got to find my State Farm agent. And they sent me to Bob Watson, and I've been with him ever since. A very happy, very satisfied customer, and I'm sure that Bob Watson will take care of you as well. Well, we all care what celebrities think, right? We care what celebrities think.
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally.
And so a couple of celebrity clips to leave you with for Dale Carter's America. We start with the unhinged Robert De Niro, who was sent to New York on behalf of the Biden campaign, by the way. They got their fingerprints all over this. And he made some very bizarre comments right outside the courtroom.
You wanted his actual speech or him clashing with the protesters? Because this is pretty good, too.
Okay, we'll play that.
Democrats, you are gangsters. You are gangsters. You're washed up. Fuck you.
Said you're washed up.
You're a softy. You're a nobody. Your movie sucks. You're trash. You're trash. You're done. You're done after this guy.
He says, F you, while he's surrounded by bodyguards, too, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a real brave guy with that crowd in New York. And somewhere during his actual speech, a car alarm went off, and that was really funny. And then you heard F Joe Biden chanted in the background. But, he basically has no reason for you to vote for Joe Biden. He has reasons that he is terrified and wants to terrify you about Donald Trump coming back into the White House.
Yeah, it's all scare tactics from this guy.
Downtown New York City. I grew up here and feel at home in these streets. I feel comfortable. The Twin Towers fell just over here, just over there. This part of the city was like a ghost town. But we vowed We would not allow terrorists to change our way of life.
Oh, great.
And we started
Trump's
the
a
Tribeca
terrorist.
Festival to bring people back. I love this city. I love this city. I don't want to destroy it. Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country.
Exactly.
And eventually he could destroy the world.
Hear the hecklers in the background?
But we vowed we would not allow terrorists.
Yeah. He's kind of short.
Yeah, he's very short. But look at that big bodyguard off to his left and behind.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to mess with that guy.
Right.
And the tattoos on the other guy.
This guy is not short. This guy is short.
Yeah, very short. All right. So that's Robert De Niro. And then Dennis Quaid weighed in as well. And you might think you know the direction he's going with this comment, but he might surprise you.
What do you think of Trump?
I think I'm going to vote for him.
Really?
Yeah, in the next election. Yes, I am.
Are you ready for the blowback?
Well, yeah.
Which inevitably comes with Trump?
I think in this election, everybody's got to, I think they're going to take a side or whatever, but it just seems to me, it just makes sense. I was ready not to vote for Trump until what I saw is more than politics. I see a weaponization of our justice system.
Yeah.
And a challenge to our Constitution, us as Americans, that I don't think we're going to have. And, Trump is the most investigated person probably in the history of the world.
That's true.
And they haven't been able to really get him. People might call him an asshole, but he's my asshole.
There you go.
Asshole.
We should have tied that into, Midwest GI.
Absolutely. His brother too, Randy Quaid, the guy from Independence Day. He's like full on Trump supporter too.
Well, and Randy Quaid saved this planet.
Yeah.
Watch the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a hero.
Gave his life in defense of this country.
He's a hero.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Until next time, when I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about, this is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.